Hi everyone and welcome to Mommy Mondays. I'm a little bit late this week as in I'm filming this uh, on Sunday night, which tomorrow is Mommy Mondays. So you're getting pretty much like a almost almost real-time video. Um, this week I'm going to go over, I love that I'm getting the questions. Manju gave some more questions, so I'm going into that. She seems to be producing the show, like leading where it's going, and I'm okay with that because I want to know what you guys want to know, because I just like the mommy conversation, because I feel like it's important for us to share our experiences so that we don't feel alone and so that we know a little bit more about the whole thing. I am guilty of never having understood motherhood or the issues along with it. Like, I mean, I guess I was very peripheral with it. So yeah, I knew, but I didn't know. I wasn't interested, and I don't find that I was very forgiving to mommies either. I can admit that. I was very like, why is your whole life consumed by your child type deal? And now I'm one of those people that like maybe 90% of my life is my child. But yeah, I also thought that like they were mostly hot mess expresses. Like when I'd see moms and like now I'm one of the hot mess express type people. But yeah, so I wish I was, I mean, even if I wasn't vocal about how annoying I found mommies to be, they're not reliable because their kid is sick or this or that, and I'm that person now. So as much as I don't know, I feel like I could have been kinder, even if I never voiced my disdain for it. I think it probably showed in my body language and in how I related to people. So, for the record, I would like to apologize to any mother that I ever lost my patience with, for whatever reason, in whatever scenario, right? Or situation. But yeah, I feel like there's a lot that you just don't know until you become a mom. So it's important to have the conversations ahead of time so that people know. Anyway, but this show in the Mommy Monday Madness, we've been chronicling like my experience and my journey. So the two questions this week that Manju had were, what was my birthing experience? And if I took advice from friends and family, or if I just followed what I read online, or is it a mixture of both? So that's more than enough content for this week. So if you're new here, I am Gianna. I typically am the closet conversationalist, but on Mondays I do Mommy Mondays. We talk about the magic of motherhood and we talk about the madness of motherhood and everything in between. If you like that sort of content, please go ahead and subscribe, share with whoever you think it's relevant to, turn on that bell so you know when I put up new videos, and join the conversation down below. Remember to tune in on Mondays for Mommy Mondays, and then whatever other days is Closet Conversations, and I talk about all sorts of things: art, fashion, lifestyle, anything, everything. So welcome. Now, I'm going to go into the advice question before I go into the birthing experience, because the birthing experience was an experience. So in terms of the advice, did I take advice? I took some advice. The thing is, like, during pregnancy, I didn't really read much, to be very honest with you, because the doctors had told me ahead of time that maybe I wouldn't, carry to term and all of that. Like, I didn't want to get my hopes up and then be shattered. So because of that, I kind of didn't read a lot of stuff. I put the app on my phone, the what to expect when you're expecting app. I put that on my phone. And so I would get an update like your baby's the size of a pea, it's the size of a pineapple, it's the size of a cantaloupe, it's the size of a bean sprout, whatever. And here's what to expect, and here's how much development is going on, and here's probably what's happening to your body and all that. I found that very helpful because, some of the things, but it still didn't mention like, dude, you might be having nosebleeds and you might be, I don't know, having gas. Well, I think it did cover the gas, but it didn't tell me about the nosebleeds. And I'm really, really pissed off about that. Because I never had a nosebleed in my life until I was pregnant. And then there were lots of them. Anyhow. So the what to expecting app was on there, and if what I would do is I would Google things. If something was happening to me, then I'd Google to ask to find out. But there was no. Did people try to give me advice? Yeah, I got a little advice here and there, and I don't know. I think some of it was helpful, or some of it, I kind of just deciphered based on, I made instant decisions on if I was going to take the advice or not take the advice. I didn't, it depended on the doctor whether I listened to them. If I felt heard by the doctor, then I listened to them. If I didn't feel heard, I kind of just ignored it. And then was it a mixture of both? I don't know. I didn't really implement too much advice or whatever. I was very nonchalant. And this is from pregnancy even to having the baby. I kind of decided that this is my baby. This is my first experience doing this. And it's my baby's only experience in this lifetime, right? So he chose me for a reason. He knew what he was getting. And I'm gonna be me the whole time so that he gets the true experience of what he signed up for. So yeah, we're getting to know each other even now, and I'm loving every version of him. And I know, I can feel that he's very pleased with his decision and me. So yeah, we're just kind of learning together and moseying through. I appreciate the advice. I don't try to give advice. I tell people the advice that I give to anybody who's having a baby or anybody who's pregnant or anybody who's had a baby is enjoy every version. Every month or two or whatever it is, you're going to meet a new person in your little one, and enjoy that person till he's the next person. And I mean, that's the most of it. I explained to them that, listen, whatever you thought you could love, however much you thought you could love, it's going to expand exponentially each time you meet this new person. And that's what I tell people. I don't say do this or do that because everyone's different. I love cheese. Lots of people are lactose intolerant and can't eat cheese. What am I going to say? Eat the cheese? No. So I think it's very important for people to be themselves and individuals and do what works for you. Now, having said that, let's talk about my journey, my birthing journey. So, remember, I was high risk, super high risk. And I had antiphospholipid syndrome. I have antiphospholipid syndrome. So, that meant I was on injections. But in order to have the baby, so I was on a blood thinner, but you end up on a different blood thinner in order to deliver. So they change your blood thinner. I think within the last 2 weeks of you being pregnant, they change you to something else because they have you very thin, I guess going up to, and then by then they need you to be less thin in case so you don't bleed out or anything like that. So they had to change my medicine. The needle was much bigger, and it was so rough. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, so they sat me down and they were like, okay, so C-section is really not an option. And I was like, what do you mean? And they were like, well, the only way we'll do a C-section is if you're going to die. So if you're going to die, then the risk of the C-section is worth the risk, basically, because other than that, because of your clotting issue, if you have the C-section, you're more at risk for death. So the only possible way for us to say, all right, we'll will you in and we will do the C-section is if you're already at risk of death. So that meant I was going to push, right? Now, I came from a generation whose mothers chose to have a C-section if they felt like it. Like they just kind of, they elected to have the C-section. And then, it's, the recovery time is not so great, but I mean, it's good that you didn't, So of course, I never always wanted a baby, but I always assumed that if I was going to have a baby, it would be C-section and they'd take out the baby and I wouldn't have to push and all this. No, now I know I have to push. And I would tell you this, like the last month of my pregnancy, I kept trying to figure out in my mind how my baby in my belly was going to get from my baby out of my body. I was just like, there's no freaking way. Like, this is not even exciting. Then it was COVID time. So every time I wanted to figure out the Lamaze classes, because of the fact that the Lamaze classes were, well, one, I was at a very far hospital because I was with a specialist doctor. So my specialist doctor was like the head of the maternal fetal unit at the Holtz, I think was the name of my hospital. It's attached to Jackson, but it's like a special children's hospital. And he was the head of the unit. So he was such a head of the unit that when I got to the hospital and they heard that I was his patient, all the people who work in his unit were like, we didn't even know Dr. Paytas had patients. Like, and to be honest with you, when I had originally called him, okay, so I went to school with a great cardiologist. Her name is Dr. Well, I don't know what her married name is, but she was Ria Sankasani. And we cheered together. She was my friend from high school. I gave her a call when I got pregnant. Like, and I was like, listen, all this is going on and I don't know what to do. And she's like, no, you need to be with the best. So she looked up who specialized in all my conditions, and it was Dr. Paytas. So she said, you need to give him a call. So I gave him a call, and his office said he's not taking patients. And I said, can you let him talk to me, because I think he'll take me. And they were like, why do you think he'll take you? And I was like, because I have enough complications that he's not going to want to not take me. And they were like, okay, what are your complications? So I listed everything out. There's a few. And they said, okay. And they hung up. Well, the next call I got in Jamaica from this doctor in Florida was from him. And he took me. And he did a whole questionnaire, everything. I knew he was going to turn me down, because if you're that high in your thing, someone like me was like going to be a real challenge. So you wouldn't leave me to chance or to someone else who doesn't know enough. So anyhow, fast forward, when I got to the hospital, they're just like, I didn't even know he takes patients. Well, he was my doctor. So I lost my train of thought as to where I was in the whole process. But yeah, so it was far to get there for the Lamaze classes, but it wasn't even just that it was far to get there. It was that they were only offering them like at like far intervals because of COVID. Like, so they would scatter the classes because I guess, face to face and all that. And then remember, you're supposed to go with someone and have someone touch you, and they weren't really wanting visitors and they were wanting you by yourself, that sort of a thing. And then it was kind of like, because they were so few and far between, the classes would get super full super fast. So like when you sign up, like when I tried to sign up, there was none available. So I had no Lamaze classes. And you watch movies and things like that, and you see the Lamaze training and you see everything, and you're like, oh my God, like, how's this gonna work? Especially since I haven't done it. So I was like, oh, this is terrible. I have to push and I don't know how to push. Anyhow, I ended up, I was staying with my aunt and uncle, and my cousin was there with me. And I had already had a scare like a month before of contractions. So then this night now, I had gone to the doctor that very morning. And that night now, I was there and I was like, I'm having some pains. So I called the doctor. They have an emergency line or whatever. And I called the line and I said, hey, this is what's going on. That time, my cousin, Beanie, she's already like checking the distance between the contractions and everything. And she's like, oh no, you're like a minute and something. Like it's no, they're too close. And I'm talking to the doctor and I'm having it while this is going on. And he's like, okay, you need to go to the hospital because you're possibly in labor. And I'm just like, okay, fine. So let me tell you something. The last thing, my aunt was going away for the weekend because it was her anniversary. And the last thing she said to me was, don't have the baby till I get back. Well, I ended up in the hospital that night. Johnny, this is like the Thursday night, I think. Well, early Thursday morning, I think. Johnny wasn't supposed to come till the Saturday. But of course, I'm in labor. And now I get down there and there's too many complications and there's too much everything. And they're like, we're not sending you back home to wait out the labor. Because apparently that's what they do. Like if you're not dilating like extremely fast, and if you're not in what they call active labor, they send you home. Now mine, they knew I was in active labor, but I ended up stopping. My dilation stopped at like 4 centimeters. So they were just like, she could go home and wait it out. But then once they looked at all my complications, they were like, oh no, she can't go home and wait it out. There is no waiting out. So because of that, they turned around and they said, let's just transfer her from, I think it was an emergency, to labor and delivery. So they took me over to labor and delivery. This time I had to call Tawny in Jamaica and be like, hey, you gotta come now, basically, because I'm going into labor and delivery. I'm in labor right now. And I'm going into, and he's like, John Noah Star. And I'm like, yes. And he's like, how am I gonna get on? And I'm like, I don't know. You have to just go to the airport. Don't even try calling. Just go to the airport and ask them to switch your ticket and just get on the next flight, whatever that is. So this was Thursday morning. So no, maybe it was Thursday night. And then Friday morning, he goes there and he gets on the last flight of the day. Like apparently every flight was full. And finally that one, I don't even know if they had enough flights. I think he was trying every airline. But then he ended up on the airline that we had originally booked for him to come on Saturday. But they only had like one flight a day and one seat left. And so they switched him. I think he had to pay some difference or whatever. They switched him to that and then he came. So he ended up walking into the hospital room where I was in labor like 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock Friday afternoon. Right? Yes. Like 5 or 6 Friday afternoon. Well, by then, I still hadn't dilated enough that they wanted. By then, they had put in a balloon of water in. So apparently they put a balloon in and they fill it with water to try to get you to dilate. I don't know if that worked. I don't think it worked. And they put Pitocin. I think that's like a medicine to help you to induce the pregnancy, induce the labor, even though I was already in labor. I think they put it to try to help. I don't know. They put some pill in to try to also help. They were trying everything because remember, no C-section, and they didn't know what was going to happen. So I'm there in pain. Before they put the balloon, though, they asked me if I wanted the balloon, and I was like, is it gonna hurt? And they were like, well, it's kind of uncomfortable. So I said, can I get the epidural before you do that? And they said yes. So I had the epidural from early. Well, not early, but when Johnny was there, after Johnny was there. And when I was in there, I could still feel pain was the issue. So I could feel this side, what's this? The left side of my body. I could feel the pain still. The right side completely numb, the left side not. So when so they're saying, do you feel this? Do you feel this? I could feel everything on the left side. So they're like, okay, well, how it works is like by gravity. So we could just turn you over so that it kind of takes more, whatever. Well, what I didn't know before they turned me over was that while they were inside my room monitoring me and dealing with me, there was a team of doctors outside who was monitoring all my vitals. Well, not even mine, the baby's vitals. So basically the baby's team was outside and my team was inside. So when they turned me onto my left side, all of a sudden this doctor runs in from outside and says, what did you do? What did you do? And they're like, we just turned her over because she had an issue with the epidural. It's not going. And they're like, move her back. And they're like, what's going on? And they're like, well, the baby's in distress. The heart rate has dropped considerably. Just move her back. So they moved me back. And they put me back on my back. And the baby's heart rate was fine. So then they said, all right, let's move her this other way. It was to the right, but then they were wanting to elevate something, or I don't remember what the contorted position was going to be. And again, the guy runs in and says, no, that's not okay either. So basically, I had to stay back on my back. So the anesthesiologist had to come in and give me something else, which I don't know, because at that point, I am freaking out kind of, because I realized that they say that it could be that the umbilical cord is around his neck. They don't know why the pressure turning on one side actually stopped him from, actually messed with his heartbeat. So like, I'm just over here like, oh, I cannot come this far. I was 38 weeks at that point, and I got a standing ovation, claps and everything. They say they never see antiphospholipid syndrome at 38 weeks in labor and delivery, because normally it's an emergency earlier on, or obviously you miscarry. So we had come this far for me to hear all of this, and I was just like, no. So I laid on my back. They gave me something else that eventually I didn't feel that, the left side anymore. And we were steady. The epidural comes with something that you can turn it up. So we're turning it up as I feel anything, and we're okay. Well, finally, there's this Haitian doctor that worked with Dr. Paytas, and she would come and check me every so often to see, and when they check you, they push their whole hand in. Okay? So she pushed her whole hand into my hoo-ha. And when she did this, it was uncomfortable, to say the least. Anyhow, finally she came out. No, that's not what happened first. What happened first is I was changing position, kind of changing position because I couldn't really turn over because of the baby. So now I'm kind of moving up and down, and at some point, I feel a gush of water come down my leg. So I alert the nurse and I say, I think my water broke or the balloon inside popped or something. Something happened. And she lifts up the sheet wherever she was and she goes, no, your water didn't break. And I'm like, yeah, go on the other side. And she goes on the other side and she opens and she goes, oh, yeah, looks like your water broke. And I was like, okay. So here comes in the Haitian doctor a few minutes later, pushes her hand up there, and it's like, oh, she's ready. Well, all I hear is breaking bad. I don't even know what they were saying, but all of a sudden, like 10 doctors end up in my delivery room. Do you hear me? 10 doctors. And then they're over on one side. On one side of the delivery room, they have like the baby's bassinet thing and some heater business and lights and all this, and I see them over there, and then I see over in front of me one of them pulls like a little stool thing and like sits on it, and then right in front of me, then they're moving my bed, so my bed starts to like all of this, and then there's another doctor here and another doctor here, and they're telling me all these disclaimers. They had come in earlier with disclaimers. They come back with some more disclaimers like, listen, anything we break, we're going to fix. And I'm like, excuse me? And they're like, yes, anything that happens to you, we're going to fix it before you leave here. You'll be fine. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, all right, you ready? You're going to have to push. And I'm just like, okay. And of course, I start with the pushing from the movies. And they're like, no, you're going to waste all your energy and you're not going to get the baby out. And I'm like, well, what do I do? And they're like, act like you're taking a shit. I'm like, what? Act like you're pushing out the biggest shit of your life. And I'm just like, what? They're like, have you never been constipated? And I'm like, not in a lot of years. No. And they're like, well, you got to push like that. You got to push like you're on a toilet. And I'm like, oh. So I'm here having trouble trying to figure out how to push that way. And I'm there. And Johnny's like pushing my head forward and holding my hand and trying everything. He's running from side to side. And then finally, like, they could see the head coming through. And like, they tell him, and he comes and he looks under and he's like, yes, Jen, I see that. And I'm just like, oh my God. And I'm there pushing, and then they realize that there's going to be an issue. And I'm there like, okay, I can't do this. Can we stop? Can we pray? Actually, I didn't even ask them if we could pray. I just prayed out loud. I made them stop the whole delivery. And I prayed out loud because I was like, there's no way I can do this by myself. Like, I realized, like, I was tired. First of all, from I entered that hospital from the Thursday till this was now after midnight on the Saturday, right? Saturday morning, after 12. And I'm there. They gave me half of a cup of ice chips and they gave me one popsicle in the entire 43 hours that I was in labor. Okay? So I was tired. I couldn't make it. I couldn't do anything. You know, normally they say that the difficulty with having a baby is like, not the difficulty, but something common that happens is like, because you're pushing like you have to take a shit, you actually take a shit. I didn't have that problem because apparently the body does something when it's going into labor, which it did that Wednesday when I felt like I was in the hospital from the Wednesday night. I think so. Maybe not. Maybe I don't know. Right. Yeah, early morning Thursday. Something. There's something that the body does, and it's like it kind of empties itself, like when it knows it's going into labor. So my body was efficient. It knew. So I had gone to the bathroom maybe 5 times that day, you know, like I was clear. So imagine you being clear And then you going in there 43 hours of half a cup of ice chips and one popsicle for the duration. And you're clear, right? So nothing, there's nothing. And then you're pushing and pushing and all of this other stuff. Listen, I was tired. I was like, there was no way. I begged 3 times for a C-section. I knew the risks. I knew that it was life-threatening to have a C-section, and I still asked for it. I turned to Johnny and I said, listen, if you have a choice between me and Lyric, you're going to save Lyric. It will be fine, right? And I was just like, this, I can't. And I tried again. You see, after that prayer, I tried again. And I don't know what happened. I cannot tell you. I know that they told me before that they could help me if I could get his head to a certain point. If I could get his head to a certain point, they can put this, like, for all intents and purposes, it's like a suction thing where they can drag him out, basically. And that would be what they would try if I could get his head to a certain point. But of course, I don't know what I'm doing to get the head to the certain point. I'm just doing what I can do. Well, after that prayer, I'm telling you, God took over, because I don't know what happened. The only thing I hear is, Jana, you did it. You pushed out the baby. And that was Johnny. And of course, I opened my eyes at that point and looked above me, and there he is wriggling. That's Lyric, wriggling above me, and he's there. And I was like, is he all right? And they were like, yes. And I must tell you, even now, like, it's so emotional, because he was more than all right. I mean, they instantly took him over they gave me, I think, a minute maybe of skin to skin. He was on me. And then he went straight over to his team. Remember, his team was over there setting up from before, so they were ready to receive him. They made Johnny cut the umbilical cord. They took him over there. And all of a sudden, like maybe a minute or so later, after I don't know, I guess they cleaned him up. I couldn't see what was going on over there. He had so many doctors. But they immediately said, Mom, we're going to take him to the NICU, because we're going to monitor his breathing. We don't like how he sounds right now. We're going to take him over to the NICU. And I was like, okay. And he went. And in that time, like, the epidural started to wear off, and I was able to look around. Like, I guess I had 3 hours in there. I started to look around, and when you looked around, there was blood everywhere, on the walls, on the floor, it was everywhere. And there were clots. Like, I got up to use a bathroom. They said that was the measure of if I could go into recovery, if I could get up and use the bathroom. So I got up and I used the bathroom, and from the toilet, I could look into the room, and under the bed was this huge clot. It was disgusting. It was just like, oh my God. Also, before they had to stitch me up because I tore. And they don't do an episiotomy, I think is what it's called, where they cut you first just in case you tear, because some people don't tear. So they said it's better to just let you tear, and then they stitch it however. Anyway, by the way, that Haitian doctor is who stitched it. And she was just like looking at Johnny, and she's like, it's going to be better than new. It's going to be the best you've ever had. And she did stitch. But before that, the scary part was, like, they make sure that they got the whole placenta out. Apparently mine tore or something. So, like, literally her hand was in there, and she was to pull out whatever was left in there. But then, as a precaution, what they do in the delivery or whatever, I don't know, I guess they use like gauze and all these things, so at the end of it they like count all the things that they had to make sure they don't leave anything in you. And I see them frantically counting, and it's like they're supposed to get 33 and they have like 32. And they're counting over and over, and they're counting and counting and counting, and they're saying they're short one. And like they're pushing up to make sure nothing's in there. And I'm just like, oh my God, they're short one. So finally they saw it stuck to something else, and so it wasn't in me. And so they could finish what they were doing with me. But yeah, it was like a war zone in there. It was like a crime scene. It was disgusting. But the best thing is, like, as I say, I was probably in there about 3 hours after I gave birth. And then by the time they were wheeling me to recovery, they brought Lyric back from the NICU. And they said he was fine. And they put him in my arms. And we went around to my recovery room. My recovery room, of course, I didn't know how to breastfeed or anything, but the hospital was so great. They had an awesome lactation specialist. Her name is Kathy, but she wasn't coming on until the morning, and this was like 3 in the morning. She wasn't coming on until about 8. But there was a nurse in passing who said, just give him the breast and see what happens. And I put him on the breast, and he started sucking immediately. They're like, yeah, he's hungry. I don't know the difference between colostrum and this and that or whatever. I didn't take any lessons before. I just kind of put him on. I don't know what he was getting. But when Kathy came the next day, she was so supportive. She showed me everything to do. She showed me how to do it. And my son is still breastfeeding to this day. So, yeah. I mean, Kathy, I've even seen her since. Like, I mean, she really just changed my whole experience of being a new mom. Like, she really gave me the confidence. She was really sweet. She was really helpful. My son got readmitted a few days later because he had belly problems. We can go into that in the next episode. What to do when your child is sick. Or how you feel when your child is sick. But yeah, and I mean, once they found out that I was in the hospital, once Kathy found out that I was there, she made sure to arrange another pump for me to get to down there, because how you help them with the belly is to breast milk and all that. Like, it was, we'll get into that in another episode. This was very nice chatting with you. Thanks for joining me for Mommy Mondays, and I'll see you next week.